A girl named Anna had a terrible dream. In her dream, she saw her mom and dad die. They were being buried in the same coffin by people who had black stones instead of eyes. When they lowered the coffin into the grave, the people started taking stones from their eye sockets and throwing them into the grave, but there weren't enough stones. Then they turned to Anna and told her to give them her stones. "I don't have any stones," the girl said. The people grabbed her and took out her eyes. They really were stones. The girl could see it even though she now had empty eye sockets. Anna woke up and cried. She couldn't calm down, even though her mom and dad were alive and told her it was just a scary dream. The girl's mom called her grandma. Grandma came right away and brought 2 white round stones with her. She gave these stones to the girl. "Hide them under your pillow," Grandma said. "And if people with stone eyes ever come into your dream again, give them these white stones instead of your eyes. Then they will forget about you." Anna hid the stones under her pillow. However, she never dreamt of people with stone eyes again. But she didn't remove the stones, even though they bothered her sleep. A year later, her grandma died. When the girl found out, she cried for a long time because she loved her grandma very much. The next day, they put Grandma in a coffin and took her to the cemetery. Anna went with everyone. But when they arrived at the cemetery, she couldn't find her mom and dad. Nobody had seen them. They carried the coffin to the grave and lowered it into the pit. The girl looked around at the people but couldn't find anyone she knew. She was surrounded by strangers. And now Anna noticed that all of them had eyes made of stone. Everything repeated itself, just like in her terrible dream. People started taking stones from their eye sockets and throwing them into the grave. Again, as in the dream, there weren't enough stones. People turned to the girl, looking at her with their eye sockets turned black holes.
"Give us your eyes,"
the people said.
"Then we can bury your grandma."
Anna got very scared and started crying.
"Don't be afraid,"
the people said.
"Your grandma will return to us. She'll live in other people's scary dreams. And then it will be your turn. Didn't Grandma tell you anything?"
And at that moment, the girl remembered what her grandma had told her. She realized that she was having a scary dream. She reached under her pillow to get the white stones her grandma had given her. But there was nothing under the pillow. Anna's mom had recently cleaned her room and thrown away the stones. When her mom and dad returned from the cemetery, they saw that the girl was lying dead on the bed, with black holes in her eye sockets. Ellie went to school. There she made new friends, and they started walking home from school together. Every time they passed by the old house, its yard overgrown with tall nettles and its trees stretching crooked leafless branches, Ellie's friends told her it was the crying house. "Why is it called the crying house?" Ellie asked. "Because sometimes you can hear someone crying inside, even though no one has lived there for years," her friends said. "And children tend to disappear around here, especially when it rains, and they are later found dead. So stay away from that house." But no matter how many times Ellie walked past the crying house, she never heard anyone crying there. One day, on a cold, rainy, gloomy afternoon, Ellie was walking home from school alone. She saw a boy standing near the crying house. "Hey!" Ellie called out, recalling her friend's stories. "Did you hear someone crying in there?" The boy turned and looked at her attentively. "No," he said. "Nobody is crying in there." "Don't go there," the girl warned. She was afraid they might find the boy dead later. "I wasn't planning to," the boy replied. He approached Ellie and she noticed he was soaking wet and shivering. She offered him her umbrella, but he didn't take it. "Do you know who used to live there?" he suddenly asked. Ellie shook her head. "A family," the boy said. "They had a daughter, about your age. They lived here happily until they had a second child." "Well, that's good," Ellie said. "2 kids can have more fun together." The boy shook his head. "No, the girl didn't like it when her parents started loving the second child more. But one day she took a big knife from the kitchen and cut off its head. When everyone found out, her parents got scared, took the girl and left. Nobody knows where they went." "You're lying," Ellie said. "No," the boy replied. "Come, I'll show you." But Ellie got scared. "I won't go." "Don't be afraid, we won't go inside," the boy assured her and started walking around, avoiding the nettles. Ellie followed him. They circled the house and stopped near the oldest tree, completely devoid of leaves. Other trees in the distance were covered in orange and red autumn leaves. Next to the tree was a shallow pit. "Here," the boy said, pointing at the pit. "They buried him here." "Who?" Ellie asked. "The boy with the cut-off head." "Where did you learn about this?" she wondered. The boy lifted his head, and Ellie saw a dreadful scar on his neck. She wanted to scream but couldn't. She wanted to run away, but her legs felt as if they were glued to the ground. "Why did you do it?" the boy suddenly asked. "What did I do?" Ellie said, bewildered. "I would never do such a thing." And she began to cry, not out of fear of the boy. That was not the reason at all. The boy stood there watching her. People who passed by the old house heard crying and quickly walked away, wanting to put as much distance between themselves and the crying house as possible. Andrew was a capricious boy. He constantly broke all the toys that were bought for him. When his mom and dad asked why he had broken a toy, the boy replied, "I was curious about what's inside." So they bought him a large construction set, but Andrew didn't bother building anything. "It's boring," he said, and he continued to break his toys, sometimes tearing off the legs and heads of his soldiers, other times smashing cars or taking apart toy guns with lights and sound effects. After this, his mom and dad stopped buying him toys. Andrew began taking toys away from younger children in the neighborhood, and intentionally breaking them so they wouldn't have toys either. As a result, all the kids in the yard stopped bringing toys from home. One day, Andrew was bored outside, so he went to an old construction site. Rumor had it that a treasure had been buried in the basement there a long time ago. However, the basement was now filled with so much garbage that finding anything would be difficult. The boy wasn't interested in treasure. He just wanted to shoot a rat with his slingshot. He even imagined how much fun it would be to bring a dead rat into the yard and scare the girls. But when Andrew descended into the basement of the old construction site, it was so dark that he couldn't see anything, not even the floor beneath him. Although rats were definitely present, as he could hear something rustling in the dark, hear squeaks, and occasionally even see the glimmer of red rat eyes. He tried shooting at those eyes, but he never hit. The rats were faster. "I need to get out of here," Andrew decided, and ventured deeper into the darkness. Here the sounds grew louder. Something was scuttling in the darkness, scratching with claws, and even sighing and groaning. Suddenly, Andrew felt terrified, realizing that rats might not be the only creatures here. He decided to turn back but couldn't find his way out. He stumbled around in the dark for a long time, tripping over the piles of garbage. Those who inhabited this place drew closer. Now they were making noise from all directions, scratching, crawling, stomping, and producing many other sounds. It seemed to Andrew as if an unknown creature with thousands of tentacles was lurking in the darkness. Andrew began to cry. "Stop it! Stop scaring me!" he yelled, but the darkness only responded with new noises. Then something in the dark started to glow. The lights were dim but not frightening, as if a New Year's garland had lit up in the distance. In the light of these small bulbs, Andrew saw strange, grotesque creatures surrounding him. They were old, dirty, broken, with severed limbs and detached parts, shattered insides where gears still spun. Some even had batteries inside them, and that's what produced the dim light. "Who are you?" Andrew asked fearfully. "We're toys," the creatures replied. It was only then that Andrew understood he was surrounded by old, discarded toys. "What are you doing here?" "They broke us and threw us away." Andrew stopped being afraid. Who would be scared of toys? "Hey, how do I get out of here?" "Follow us," said the toys, and they moved into the darkness. But the toys led him not to the exit, but to a deep pit. Andrew peered inside, but in the darkness he couldn't see anything. He could only sense that it was very deep, and there was a moldy, rotten smell coming from it. Suddenly, Andrew felt frightened again. "Where did you bring me, you stupid toys?" he shouted. "I need to get out of here. Up. Home." But the toys replied, "We will throw you down there. You will break, and then we will see what's inside you." And they lunged at Andrew. He stepped back, not realizing there was no ground beneath him, and he fell into the pit with a terrible scream. Nancy was walking in the park with her grandmother when she spotted a store with big, beautiful dolls behind the glass. She really wanted one of those dolls and began to ask her grandmother, "Let's go into that store and buy a doll." "What store?" her grandmother asked, puzzled. "That one," Nancy pointed with her hand, but her grandmother couldn't see anything and thought that perhaps Nancy was coming down with something. So she hurriedly took her home to check her temperature. However, Nancy turned out to be perfectly healthy. The next day when she went out to play, she once again saw the store with dolls. This time, the store was right in the backyard. Nancy rushed back home. "Mom, there's a doll store. The dolls there are so big and beautiful. Please buy me one." But when her mom and Nancy went downstairs to the backyard, the store had already vanished. The following night, Nancy woke up because her room was as bright as day. The light was coming from the window. Nancy approached the window and saw that it was no longer a window. It was a glass door leading to the doll store. Nancy grabbed her piggy bank from the shelf and hurried into the store before it disappeared again. "Are you here to buy a doll?" asked the salesman when he saw Nancy. Nancy looked at him and felt scared. For some reason, she thought he looked like a giant spider. She even thought she saw long spider-like legs with claws instead of hands. But then the salesman took a doll from the shelf and placed it next to Nancy. The doll was so beautiful and so big, almost as tall as Nancy herself, and it looked incredibly real. Nancy thought that she might not have enough money in her piggy bank to buy such a doll. "How much does this doll cost?" she asked. The salesman extended his hand and pointed at her piggy bank. Nancy gave him the piggy bank. "Can I take the doll with me?" Nancy inquired. The salesman nodded. Nancy grabbed the doll and rushed toward the exit, fearing that the salesman might change his mind. But when she was back in her room, the doll opened its eyes, grabbed Nancy by the throat, and began to strangle her. Nancy was so frightened that she lost consciousness. When she woke up, she found herself transformed into a doll, standing on a shelf in the store alongside the other dolls. She couldn't move, scream, or cry. Now, she could only wait for someone to come and buy her. Then, she would strangle the new owner and live their life, until her spider-like owner returned her to his store once more. In a house where a boy named Peter lived, there was a locked attic. Peter really wanted to explore it, but his parents never allowed him to go up there. "You'll just break something," his father would say. His father always kept the key to the attic with him and never left it lying around. Occasionally, he would go up to the attic, move things around, and mutter to himself. One day, Peter's father went on a business trip and left the attic key with his mother. Peter secretly observed where his mother hid the key. When she wasn't at home, he took the opportunity to sneak into the attic. The attic was dark, filled with old boxes and furniture. Suddenly, he heard a voice from the darkness. "Hey!" the voice called. "Over here!" The voice seemed to come from the shadows, and Peter couldn't see anything. Near the attic door, there was a candlestick with a lit candle, so he grabbed it. However, the candle didn't illuminate much. "I'm here," the voice repeated. "Move the wardrobe." Peter cautiously approached the voice. He pushed the wardrobe aside and discovered a large mirror attached to the closet door. The voice seemed to originate from the mirror. The room inside the mirror was darker than the attic itself, and the candlelight didn't reflect on its surface. Peter strained his eyes but couldn't make out anyone or anything inside. "Who are you?" Peter asked. "I'm your great-grandfather," came the reply from the mysterious figure inside the mirror. "Your father's father locked me in here." Peter was astonished. He wondered how someone could be locked inside a mirror. "Why did they lock you in there?" Peter inquired. "They were afraid of me," the voice replied. "But you're not afraid, are you?" "No," Peter replied, although he was secretly terrified. "Don't be scared," the man inside the mirror said. "If I could have escaped, I would have done so long ago." Peter moved closer to the mirror, trying to get a better look at the person inside. He even reached out his hand to touch the mirror. Suddenly, the figure inside the mirror grabbed his hand and started pulling him inside. "Let go!" Peter shouted and began to struggle, but his hand was being pulled further and further inside. Almost his entire arm had disappeared into the mirror when Peter struck the mirror with the candlestick he held in his other hand. The mirror cracked. A cry of pain emanated from the figure inside the mirror. Then Peter screamed too. He saw his own severed hand inside the broken mirror, but at least he was free. Peter fell back and crawled away from the mirror. His hand was gone. It remained trapped within the mirror.